My name is Barbara Velasquez. I am coordinator of International Intercultural Education at Metropolitan Community College. Welcome to the college's 13th annual Diversity Matters book series. Today's session to discuss There by Tommy Orange was postponed due to inclement weather last week that closed the college. Thanks to those who are returning to join the discussion today. If you have not read the book and would like to secure a copy and are an MCC student, staff, or faculty member, contact the MCC libraries who will mail you a borrowed copy. They will explain to you the return procedures since their buildings are currently closed. Your microphones will be silenced during the presentation, but open during the discussion period. You may also send questions at any time to the chat function, which will be considered for the final discussion. Your continued attendance at International Intercultural Education programming may qualify you for recognition throughout the year if you complete the online evaluation and include your name and contact information. The online address for the evaluation will be on a slide at the end of the program and also in the chat function. It is mccneb.edu/IIE-EVAL. Also watch in the chat for a chance to win a free copy of There, which would be sent to those who respond to a question. Gretchen Carroll serves as the Multicultural Outreach Coordinator for the Office of Multicultural Affairs at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. In her capacity as Multicultural Outreach Coordinator, she works to support and advocate for the underrepresented students on campus. She is the advisor to the only Native American student organization on campus, Intertribal Student Council, and is involved with organizing and planning Native American cultural events for Native American Heritage Month and the Wambli Sapa Memorial Powwow. Ms. Carroll is a strong advocate for all Indigenous people and actively works in the community as a speaker, teaching beading, as a member of the Circle of Grandmothers, radio DJ, and promoter of health and wellness. Ms. Carroll is an enrolled citizen of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes of Oklahoma and is a descendant of Cheyenne Peace Chief, Chief Black Kettle. Please welcome Gretchen Carroll.
Wewewona, Nahe Shive, Gretchen Carroll, Natistas. That means good morning. My name is Gretchen. I am Cheyenne, and like Barbara said, I am an enrolled citizen of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes of Oklahoma. And I wanted to say Nayash to Metropolitan Community College, that is thank you, and Nayash to Barbara Velasquez for asking me to lead this book discussion today. And I am honored and grateful to be here with all of you today. So Nayash to all of you. I'm going to go through my PowerPoint presentation and then open it up for discussion and questions at the end. So if you can think of anything while I'm doing my discussion, please put it in the chat so we can address it at the end, because I'd love to hear all your thoughts and questions. And I just want to mention that throughout this presentation that I may interchange between saying Indian, Native, Native American, Indigenous. I myself like to be called Indigenous or just Cheyenne, but there's a lot of Natives that go by all of those. So if you are ever wondering what you should call somebody, always just ask them first. So everybody's different. So thanks for that. Next slide, please. So today we are discussing one of my favorite books. I've now read it twice, There by Tommy Orange. Next slide. And Tommy Orange is a recent graduate from the NFA program at the Institute of American Indian Arts. He is a 2014 McDowell Fellow and a 2016 Writing by Writers Fellow. He's an enrolled member of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes of Oklahoma He was born and raised in Oakland, California, and currently lives in Angels Camp, California. And I just wanted to mention that you might have heard me say that he is an enrolled member of our tribe, which is my same tribe, but I said I was a citizen, enrolled citizen of my tribe. So some natives say they are an enrolled member. I like to say citizen. And I like how my brother explains it, that, you know, it's not a country club, it's not a club, it's not like a membership. Each Native American tribe are their own individual tribal nation. So as I am a citizen of the United States, I am also a citizen of my tribe. So you'll hear that difference from different natives, how they describe that, but they mean the same thing. We are part of our tribe. Next slide, please. So this is the list of characters. There is a novel about 12 urban Indians and how their lives are connected and how they all end up at the big Oakland powwow. There opens up with a somewhat shortened synopsis of Native American history, from genocide and the killing of natives and the displaying of their severed body parts, to stereotypes, mascots, and symbols like the Indian head that we used to see come up at the end of the night on our television sets when programming was over. I don't know if any of you remember that, but I can remember that the Indian head with the like bullseye circle around it used to end the evening off, right? So, and then it really discusses how natives have been treated, viewed, and portrayed, all leading us up to the urban Indian. And after years of trying to eradicate us, the government created the Indian Relocation Act. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the Indian Relocation Act of '56. The United States government's efforts to assimilate American Indians into mainstream culture can be seen throughout the 20th century in the Bureau of Indian Affairs, called the BIA, activities. In 1953, the US Congress established a new policy towards American Indians, termination. This policy eliminated much government support for Indian tribes and ended the protected trust status of all Indian-owned lands. In response to this policy, the BIA began a voluntary urban relocation program. American Indians could move from their rural tribes to metropolitan areas such as Chicago, Denver, Los Angeles, Cleveland, and Seattle. And I'm just inserting this, I believe Omaha was one of them too. BIA pledged assistance with locating housing and employment. Numerous American Indians made the move to cities. They struggled to adjust to life in a metropolis and faced unemployment, low-end jobs, discrimination, homesickness, and the loss in the traditional cultural supports. The urban relocation program changed the face of cities as well as American Indian culture. American Indians who returned to the reservation often found they did not fit in with those who stayed behind. When BIA urban relocation efforts started, nearly 8% of American Indians lived in the cities. The 2000 census noted that American Indian populations had risen to approximately 64%. Next slide, please. So move to the city, they said. It will be fun, they said. This is an actual poster sent to Native Americans to try and entice them to come to the cities. This one was to come to Denver, you know, a chance to have a new life, good jobs, training, you'll have a happy home, you know, come check out our beautiful city. So it showed happy scenes and stuff, trying to get us to relocate. Next slide. So I love this book because it tells the story of urban Indians, and that I can relate to a lot because I myself am an urban Indian. I was born in the city of Boston and then relocated here to Omaha, Nebraska. So I've only known the city, and I didn't live on a reservation or anything like that. And this was one of my favorite quotes in the book. And it says, "We came to know the downtown Oakland skyline better than we did any sacred mountain range, the redwoods in the Oakland hills better than any other deep wild forest. We know the sound of the freeway better than we do the rivers, the howl of the distant trains better than the wolf howls. We know the smell of gas and freshly wet concrete and burned rubber better than we do the smell of cedar or sage or even fry bread, which isn't traditional, like reservations aren't traditional. But nothing is original. Everything comes from something. Nothing came before, which was once nothing." And then you can see on the left side there, his quote in the book, "They used to call us sidewalk Indians. They called us certified, superficial, inauthentic, culturalists, refugees, apples." And then above that, some other terms were concrete native and pretend Indians. And you can do the next slide there. And sometimes we urban Indians get a bad rap from other natives and non-natives. You know, natives like we aren't, they'll say like we aren't real natives if we're from the city, we don't know our traditions, we don't know our cultures, so we can't be real natives. And I struggled with that for a while myself, but now I have come to learn and realize who I am, and I'm okay with who I am. And this was one of my favorite quotes in there. You know, you're Indian because you're Indian because you're Indian. You're not Indian because you know all your cultural ways. You're not Indian because you know the language. You're not Indian just because you came from the reservations. We were, and it says Indians, but we were indigenous tribal people way before even all of that stuff, you know. So for reservation Indians to say, "Oh, you're not native because you're not from the reservation," you know, sometimes I want to say, well, you weren't from the reservation either. You know, we came from somewhere else before that, you know. So you're Indian because you're Indian because you're Indian. So this story is focused around characters' involvement with the big Oakland powwow and their journeys getting there. And powwow is a very important to Native people. It's a social gathering where we can get together and see a lot of our family and friends. And I don't know if all of you have gotten the chance to attend the Metro Powwow or the University of Nebraska Omaha Powwow, but they're fun, beautiful gatherings. Next slide. And that's a picture of me and my mom. Powwows. Today, the powwow is a place to meet together and join in traditional Native dance and song. It is a time to visit with friends, renew old acquaintances, and make new ones. It is an opportunity for Native people to honor and preserve their culture. For many Native Americans struggling to live in the contemporary world and still remain true to their heritage, a powwow is a demonstrative symbol exemplifying the strength and vitality of their legacy. Next slide. We've been coming from miles, and we've been coming for years, generations, lifetimes, layered in prayer and hand-woven regalia, beaded and sewn together, feathered, braided, blessed, and cursed. Next slide. So this is just a little picture of my family, my mom there with all her grandchildren. We grew up, like I said, in the city, especially in Boston, and I wasn't involved in my culture. And my mom, she was adopted when she was younger, and she wasn't involved in her culture. And it wasn't until she reconnected with her family that she got connected with culture. So ever since then, we've been getting to know our heritage and our culture and going to powwows. And mom is a traditional dancer, and she's teaching the ways to our grandchildren and children. So, you don't have to be just from the reservation, like I said, to learn and enjoy your culture. Um, you still have time to learn your ways and figure out how you fit in to everything. Next slide. So, when I was before I go into this slide, while I was reading this book, I was, they explain a couple times what the meaning of there, the title of the book is. And I just wanted, I'm not going to tell you what his definition of there is. I would like you to read the book and see that. But for me, there actually means that even if I wanted to go back home or go back to my true being or belonging, there is no there anymore. Even if I wanted to go back to Boston, where I grew up, it's not the same anymore. It's not the same there that used to be there anymore. And that's kind of how it's been for, urban Indians. We really can't go back to something that's not there anymore for us. Even if our, you know, natives that live on reservations, they can never go truly back to where they came from. And this is kind of what that book is about. There is no there sometimes for us anymore. And we just make a life and home in the spot that we're in. And so it'd be interesting to hear at the end here what you all think that there means to you. But this quote in the book really made me step back and think for a minute about the word resilient. We use it a lot. I see it in a lot of conversation with Native Americans. We're resilient. We got through this all. We're stronger for all the things that we went through. We've survived. We're resilient. But then I read this quote, and don't make the mistake of calling us resilient. To not have been destroyed, to not have given up, to have survived is not a badge of honor. Would you call an attempted murder victim resilient? And that really made me think about that word and how we use it. So at the end of this discussion, I'd like to hear your thoughts about this quote. And I'd like to, next slide, please, sorry. So just a funny thing, real quick. So I always thought it was really funny when non-natives would come up to me and say, hey, do you know this native person? And I'd be like, should all natives know all natives? No, I don't know that person. But in reality, you usually find, since we're such a small population, that a lot of natives either know of somebody who knows that somebody, or somehow knows somebody who knows that somebody. We're all so connected because our communities are so small. So when you're reading this book, they're there, and you read their stories and how they're so interconnected, especially being native. I relate to it so much, and this book is just so beautiful how he connects all of their stories together. And he doesn't tell it in a linear fashion. Our stories are more circular. He'll go from, the past to the present to the future, but he connects these characters so beautifully, and talks about their journey on how they're getting to this powwow, or how they're involved in getting this powwow together. And I don't want to give too much away, but if you read the story, my biggest question that I would probably want to ask Tommy Orange, and Barb, you might have thought about this when you were reading this book, but when they're talking about robbing the powwow, these characters are making a plot to go steal money from the powwow. That really hit me, like, I've never even thought of that. I don't think any natives would have thought of that. And it kind of made me worried. I always wanted to ask Tommy Orange, like, Tommy, by you putting that out in the universe, do you think that you're putting some ideas into people's head? Because I don't know if any of you know what it takes to put on a powwow, but there's a lot of money involved, and you see a lot of prize money, and you see a lot of, dancer pay and all these things, big prize money. That was the first thing that popped in my head, like, oh boy, I don't know if you'd want to say that and put that out there, but hopefully, nobody will take that and run with it and use it. But so anyways, this book, all the characters are so connected. You get to read about their journeys. And we have a saying, well, the Lakotas have a saying. I just use it a lot because I'm around a lot of Lakotas here in the prairies, but they have a saying in Lakota called Matakio Asin, and it's called, "We are all related." And that doesn't mean that we're all related like mom and sister and brother. It means that we're all connected, that all people are connected. We're connected spiritually with the earth. We're connected to the plants. We're connected to the four-legged and the winged animals, we're all connected somehow. And that's what this book talks about, especially with the urban natives. When they came to the cities, they automatically connected with each other because they are away from their homes. They built Indian centers, they got their powwows together, but because that's what kept them going, that connectedness with each other and building communities within these cities. And we have a word for that in Cheyenne, that's called "We Are Related." I apologize because I cannot say it yet, but I believe just looking at our languages are just beautiful. I'm glad there's a word for that out there, but we are all related. We are all connected. And I hope if you haven't got to read this story, I hope you get the book and read it and enjoy it. There's a lot of books out there about our history, about reservation life, things like that, but there's not a lot about urban Indians, urbanness and stuff like that. So I was really glad that Tommy Orange wrote this book. I believe he's going to be writing another one. I hope it's a sequel to this book, because after you read it at the end, I'm not going to give it away, but I want to find out what happens after that. So I really hope that he writes a continuation of this book. And I just want to again say thank you all, Ne Ash, for having me here and watching my presentation. But I would really love to open it up and ask questions or hear your comments, see if we have anything in the chat. And next slide. If we don't have any questions, I have a few of my own here, but I would love to open it up and hear those who have read it, what you thought about the book. So Barb, we can open the discussion up.
And Jason, you could open the mics for everybody. So we have a question. This is a fiction book. What aspects seem fictional and which aspects seem most realistic?
So me, the fictional part was robbing the powwow because I could not even imagine someone trying to do that. So I hope that never becomes a real thing. But a lot of it was real to me. The relationships, the dysfunction. I have been through a lot of dysfunction in my life. The identity problems, especially on a, can I just ask how many have read this book? Because I don't want to give too much away, but especially for like the young boys who are trying to figure out who they are, the young man who wants to become a dancer. A lot of times when they're saying, oh, I'm not Native unless I do this or behave a certain way or getting into my tradition. I've felt that a lot. You know, if I'm not doing a certain thing a certain way or involved in certain things, am I truly being Native? You know, alcoholism, I've dealt with that. One of the characters is dealing with addiction in there. And I really like the part where they're talking about the family, the mom and the girls that are going over to Alcatraz with the mom for that movement when the natives took over Alcatraz. I really, really love that because I've heard a lot of stories about how great the movement was, which it was, the great things that they were doing, taking over that. But in this book, you kind of hear the true stories of really what happened over there. It wasn't always good. You know, there was a lot of drinking over there, a lot of dysfunction that they didn't really know what they were doing. You know, so it's good to hear those kind of stories, the truth underneath because a lot of times people, um, what is it called? Elaborate or put Native people up there like, um, I can't think of the word, but put us not up on a pedestal, but like where these, you know,
Noble.
what was that?
The noble. They make us seem like we're noble Indians.
Yeah.
And we're so much more than that. We're real people.
Yes.
Real people.
So in the
yeah.
book, it shows that, you know, it talks about the realness, you know, of things without making us feel, the book didn't make me feel dirty or bad about being Native. It just told true stories.
Yeah, and to me, it was more factual, Barb, than it was fiction. Because I know a lot of Native families, and they're not all spiritual. They're alcoholics. There's a lot of substance abuse. But the one thing that I noticed that all of them have is they are proud. They're Native American. And that wasn't true when I was growing up. I was ashamed I was Native American, that I was Indian. I didn't even know what that meant. So I think that's one of the biggest things with our Native people today. We are proud people. And we're proud that we're Native. Getting back to those boys, you know, that felt to be Indian, you had to dress in regalia. When I reconnected with my family and started learning more about my ways, I used to wear lots of jewelry, Native jewelry. I wanted people just to see my outward appearance, say, yeah, I'm Native American. But the more I became aware of who I really was and proud of who I was, yeah, I might wear some jewelry. You know, I wear my regalia at powwows, but I don't have to be ostentatious and go wearing all this stuff. Like a lot, you'll notice a lot of people that are still trying to learn who they are will, you know, wear a lot of feathers. They'll wear a lot of beads hanging down, you know. So, you know, we're all different. We're all learning to be who we are. And I think when you ask about the there, to me, there means where we are right now, where I am right now. I'm in Tennessee, which I never expected to be. When I lived in Omaha, that was my there. When I lived in Boston, That was my there. And that's what there means to me.
So I will say, Gretchen, that yes, when I saw the part about stealing from the powwow, it brought back a lot of memories for me of standing with police officers around me because there was money,
Mhm.
etc. You know, just all sorts of stuff. And also, I'm glad to hear you say that that never crossed your mind, because when I read it in a book, it makes me wonder, oh, are some people thinking of that, right? So yeah, that did occur to me. I also felt really sad for the boy who had to hide it from his auntie that he wanted to dance. And you know, um, I guess we find out that it's okay. She really kind of gets what's going on and it's okay to her, but he feels like he has to hide it.
Yeah, like my mom was saying, there's, this whole generation of Native people who didn't want to talk about their culture or talk about their past, but it wasn't that they didn't want to talk about their culture, it's that they didn't want to talk about their experiences, like boarding school, like the alcoholism, the drugs, the abuse. That's not the culture. Those are just effects of the government and policies and things that have happened to us. So they didn't have a connection to their culture or their language or tradition and stuff like that to talk about. So when they say they don't want to talk about their past and stuff like that, it's mostly because of the bad things that have happened to them. But once, because then you'll find natives in that same generation who have, stuck to their tradition or culture and love to talk about all those things, and tell stories about the past and things like that. So it's not the culture that they don't want to talk about, it's the bad things that have happened to them and their family due to government policies.
As a non-Native American, when I read the book, I had so many different emotions. It just tore me in so many different directions. And, my I was happy in some parts and I cried in some parts and I got angry in some parts. Then I was embarrassed and, because of the history and that. And I know I have classically learned a way different history than what I've learned in these past number of years working with the powwow and working with other students and things. And, I was just, I don't even know how to explain it. It was just such a huge array of emotions. I had to put it down and stop reading it at one point because my mind wouldn't absorb all of it, and then, sorry, I'm having an emotional day here, but it just makes me angry to know that people had to go through that kind of crap, and it's still going on, and that makes me angry because I don't see that it's much. Maybe it's a little more sophisticated now, and it's not as blatant as it was in past generations, but it just makes me mad, and you get that feeling of helplessness. And I'm reading that book, all this stuff kept, and I remembered all the stories that were told me by people that I've met along my path, and people that I've gotten connected to, and I've watched. And when you talk about the pride, I see that, and I've watched students as I worked with them come in there without that and watch that pride just develop and expand, and it's just so awesome for me. So I just want to share the emotional, coming from another viewpoint. It really does impact. The book really hit me hard. So
Thank you, Deborah, for sharing that. The most beautiful thing that I see in our culture nowadays is my grandchildren and like students that I meet in college and in high school, and they are so proud of being Native American. They speak up, they talk about it, They wear their braids. They want to participate in powwow. They want to relearn their language. And even though we still have some things going on that we're dealing with, like one of the biggest suicide rates still among young people, I could have never talked about my culture when I was that age. I knew I was Native. I didn't know my culture, but I tried so hard not to be Native. I tried so hard to fit in with the general population, which was white in my community, but my grandson, he's 5 years old. He wears his braids. And if someone, says, oh, you're so cute, you little girl. No, I'm a Native American boy, and he's proud to say that, so I see things slowly changing and slowly, people not hiding their nativeness like they had to before. Because I see pictures like when my mom was young, all the Native women look just like all the non-Native girls, same hairdos, wearing the same poodle skirts and things like that. But now you see the young girls being so proud to wear their ribbon skirts and, just so I'm really happy about that.
You're right, Gretchen. It's a matter of simply adaptability. We're still in the process of adaptation to be, to take part in the setting and just simply find purpose. You had a great presentation here, Gretchen, and I've made a question here in the chat. What should be a goal for future cultural learning?
So one of my biggest goals as a nation, I guess, for the United States is to make Indigenous studies mandatory, especially that first year coming into college for everybody, not just non-natives, but natives too. And to teach it throughout the high school. It'll have to trickle down, but to start it off in your first year of college everywhere, mandatory. I myself, like I said, grew up on the East Coast. I knew nothing about my tribe. I knew all about the East Coast natives. I didn't even think there were natives still alive out here in the Midwest. We didn't learn that in school. It wasn't until in my 40s when I went back to college and took my first Native American intro to Native American studies, my eyes just opened and I was like, what? What are you teaching us in school? It was all wrong, So I think that is the first step, especially for natives who are not connected, just to start learning themselves, because then that starts the ball rolling to want to know more. So now I am determined to try and learn some of my language. Like earlier, I threw out a couple words that I know a handful of words, but I believe that it's important to keep our languages alive. I'm more connected spiritually now. I've learned a lot from the Lakotas and the Winnebagos and the Omahas living here in Nebraska. But it just opens my eyes to want to learn more. So I hope that one day it will be a mandatory subject for everybody.
Well, yes, you're right there, Gretchen, because here's the thing. Everyone makes the joke, but it is true. They don't tell you all the stuff during American education. And that's the unfortunate factor here, is that it really does come a matter of actually having, good education that can cover the basis and to provide lessons for those to, simply not repeat those same mistakes and stuff.
To follow up on that, curriculum has to be reviewed. The books that are in the schools have to be reviewed, because they don't present us in an honest, how we really are. I've always said to people, history was written by the conquerors. And that's what we learn in our school systems. We don't learn it from our people, what it was really like, but it's starting to I know that there are some, even in the OPS school system, I know they're already looking at changing or updating the curriculum. My grandson here in Tennessee, he was asked by his philosophy professor, what book should we be adding to our curriculum? And he asked, Grandma, I'd like to talk about There, There. And I said, that's a fantastic book. Do a review on that, do a paper on it, and recommend that to be added to the curriculum at your college. And I don't know yet still if it's been changed, if it's been added or not, but we need things like that. Change in curriculum, definitely.
Most certainly. There was another question here by Jason Lyon. Says, there's a couple here. What does there mean to you specifically?
So the there that specifically means to be, like I mentioned before, like there is no there anymore. You know, the people always say, well, not every people, but people, you hear people say, go back to where you came from, or, you know, go back to your home, or go back to the reservation, or go this or go that. We couldn't even do that if we wanted to. You know, there is no there anymore. There is no my original homelands anymore. They've been taken, they've been destroyed, we've been pushed out, you know, we've been put on reservations, you know. Reservations aren't our homes, you know, but that's how I understood it to be in the book. You know, there is no there, and everybody can interpret it how they want, but that's just kind of how I interpreted it, that there is no there, even if I wanted to go wherever that was. So that's kind of how I saw it, Sam.
Mm-hmm.
Was there another question you said?
Can't think off the top of my head. I could say, like, what's a specific artifact that you hold very dear?
Artifact. You mean like a family heirloom or something that I consider sacred, or?
Yeah, like what exactly do you hold very close to yourself?
Well, I have a medicine bag that I keep some very sacred things and plants in there that that I'll wear sometime to help me feel protected or safe. I have rocks that I've picked up along my journeys on a special day. You know, when I've gone hiking with my daughters in Arizona, you know, I found a rock, you know, that's special to me that I hold sacred. You know, there's,
Bear Butte.
yeah, just from Bear Butte or from Tennessee, you know, those are sacred items to me. Um, I think I have more memory kind of objects that are more sacred to me than what you would call an artifact. I think an artifact, like even if I had something that belonged to my grandma or grandmas, wouldn't be an artifact. It would be a family heirloom, or, you know, a precious item or something like that, I would call it. But it's more the simple things that I hold value to, like those rocks, you know, or a pair of earrings somebody gives me, you know.
You have those rocks with you right now?
Yes, they're in my home. Yeah.
It must be very nice.
Yes. Well, they're little. I didn't take big, huge boulders or anything.
Yeah, that's fine.
Something I can put in my pocket and bring home and have a memory of, you know, because rocks are sacred. They are our oldest living relatives on the earth. They hold more memories than we can even imagine. So just that rock that I pick up, I think not only of that day, but what has that rock been through? What has it seen? How many people have passed it? You know, all those things go through my mind.
I mean, we as life forms derive from the amino acids of rocks, so there's that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Before we end here, Gretchen, there is another question that's come through. What are your thoughts about the fact that there are so many matriarchal women in the book? I am thinking about Opal, Maxine, and Maggie.
I think that's awesome because that's how we were. That's how our cultures were. The matriarchs were a huge part of our tribes in our decision making. You know, the conquerors and their history took our roles out of that. You know, when our chiefs and our men were signing treaties and all that stuff, you know, I'm sure they went and got, you know, the opinion from our women first. You know, we were in control of our households and personal belongings and things like that, you know,
Raising children.
raising children and, you know, so we were a huge part in all of our stories, you know, so it didn't surprise me at all in this book. That's just how it was and how it should be, you know, so we're strong women.
Now, I was going to go back to Deb Lahota, when you were talking about the emotion that you felt. And something that struck me about the book is I think that it was very powerful at capturing emotion. Sometimes we feel we can't explain it. And we often have people from the Human Services Program watching. I don't know if they are with us today, but the way the woman described her battle with alcoholism was phenomenal. And I think for anybody who's trying to understand maybe providing services as a chemical dependency counselor, etc., reading through that passage maybe several times even, I think can give you some insight.
I think one of my favorite characters was Opal. And she was the one that was raising the boys. And when they kept asking her, well, teach us how to be Indian. And she replied to them, you're Indian because you're Indian because you're Indian. And that reminded me of my grandma, Irene Hamilton, who was Cheyenne and who was the one that I reconnected with when I reconnected with my family. And she was the one who started teaching me about my ways. And when I would ask a question, she said, no, don't ask a question, just watch, listen, and learn. And that's how I learned my culture. Just from observing and watching other Native women, other Native people, how they acted. So I love that statement that she says, you're Indian because you're Indian because you're Indian.
Yeah, that was one of my favorites too.
It's I actually thought of a new question here where I've had this discussion with my grandmothers, well, two of my grandmothers beforehand, where they talk about their ancestry and all that. Like one finds pride in their ancestry and the other didn't because she wasn't fond of the history of of how her ancestry was before, because it was one of the her family was one of the first that came to America, and they embodied all the problems that those who colonized America had. Basically, it was really problematic for her. She tends to not stray from all that stuff. What I'm asking is here is like, for those, what do you say to those who don't find pride in their ancestry and all that?
So for one, like I was mentioning before, they probably don't find pride in their ancestry because they're not going back far enough. They're just focusing on the problems and issues of a certain time period or how others look at that culture. I am biracial. My dad is Black, my mom is Cheyenne, and I had a real hard time being proud of my Black culture for a long, long, long time, because the only thing I saw was, because my Black family, they didn't really talk about the history of like where we came from and all our ancestors, but the only thing that I ever heard, being raised in a majority of white people, suburbs, was how bad Black people were, how didn't have jobs, weren't smart, they came from slaves, they should go back where they come from, they should, all these horrible things. So I had no, I didn't, how could I be proud of those things, But it wasn't until I got older when I learned the real history, of their strength and their contribution to this country and all the things that they did to make my life to be able to live, and to go on. Those are the things that make me proud of being a Black woman. And just like being Native American, I didn't know what that meant when I was young. It was about, oh, they were drinkers, bums, homeless, not smart, not educated. And like I said, it wasn't until I got older when I learned, that percentage wise, we have the least amount of alcoholism when you look at all the cultures. Our people are intelligent, smart, beautiful, artists, singers, all kinds of things to be proud
Educated,
of.
historian, scientist.
Yeah, everything. So that's something to be proud of. So unless you know your true ancestry of the good things, there might not be anything that you know of to be proud of, so.
Well, I can already be taken proud of with my grandmother because that's like the closest I can imagine that goes far. But she opts to not reminisce about the past. She more or less told me she always just simply looks forward to the future and stuff like that.
Mhm, mhm. And like I said, that's from bad experience and bad portrayal of her culture and stuff. So yeah, I can see that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anybody knows, but Gretchen's my daughter. So I'm just putting that out. I'm so proud of her. I am.
Super.
Very
I'll
thankful.
call you later, okay? I'm on a meeting right now, honey. Okay, bye.
So maybe if anybody has one more question, maybe somebody who hasn't had a chance to ask their question yet. And then I'd like to let Gretchen, if she has anything she'd like to say in closing, because we are coming near to the end of our session.
I could probably think of one last question. So Gretchen, so you've been doing this for a while. Can you think of like a story during your time? Like, can you think of somebody that was actually inspired for taking part in this?
I don't understand the question. Taking part of
Sorry
what?
for my phrasing here. I'm bad here. Can you think of a story in which you've met someone who was impacted by these sessions like these?
By talking about Native culture and everything, or?
Yeah. Can you like think of someone who was like heavily impacted by this?
I think a lot of maybe non-natives. I can't think of anyone specific, because when non-natives come in here, Native Americans speak of our current life and things that are happening now. I always find people learn something at least from these talks, but I'm sorry, I can't think of a specific story, but I know having these discussions, especially on Native authors, opens up people's minds and opinions and perspectives. So the more you can read by Native authors and actually other authors, diverse authors, you know, not just all white people write books. And especially if you want to find out about somebody's history, read from somebody, you know, who is a part of that history. And get the, you know, their perspective. So I think having these discussions are awesome. So
Right. Well, this has been a really great talk. I
thank
very
you.
much appreciate it.
Thanks.
So we want to thank Gretchen and thank our audience for making this time together, for prioritizing your time, coming to learn. I'm going to ask Jason to please put up our final slides. A reminder that we have an online evaluation at mccneb.edu/IIEEVAL. We'd love to hear back from you. And then the next book in the series is How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accent by Julia Alvarez. The discussion will be led by Maria Valentin, who was formerly with the U.S. Census Bureau Partnership Specialist. She is currently a community activist, volunteer, contributor, but she's excited to meet with us on Thursday, March 25th from 10 to 11 Central, and it will again be a Zoom presentation. So thank you, everybody. Again, thanks, Gretchen Carroll, for taking the time, preparing
Nice
yourself.
to see you, Kathy.
All right. Bye, guys.
Thank you, Gretchen.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Read the book.
Oh, it's an awesome book.